Cheers, Rockets fans. Welcome to The Locker Line, an exclusive podcast from the home of the Rockets.
Whoa!
Sports Talk 790.
Rockets!
The Locker Line is proudly served to you by Carbox Clutch City Lager.
It is good!
Oh, yeah? Red Nation, get ready. Get ready. The Locker Line starts now.
Welcome aboard. Ben Dubose here, Paolo Alves there. Welcome in to yet another episode of The Lager Line, our third of the week. As always, this show is served to you courtesy of Clutch City Lager of Karbach Brewing, and with additional support from our friends over at Sports Talk 790, the official flagship radio station of your Houston Rockets. As for us, we're your host. You can follow Paolo on Twitter at Paolo Alves NBA, the show on Twitter at The Lager Line, and via the link tree in our Twitter bio. And you can follow me on Twitter at Ben Dubose. You can also read my work in USA Today's Rockets Wire, where I'm the editor. Just hit up rocketswire.usatoday.com. Our most recent shows in the last few days have been a bit more free agency focused, and certainly there's good reason for that, since the Rockets have at least $60 million in cap room, and free agency negotiations can officially take place just 2 weeks from now on Friday, June 30th. But the NBA draft, where the Rockets currently sit at number 4 and number 20 in the first round order, is even sooner than that on Thursday, June 22nd. So in today's show, we're going to pivot back to something of a draft focus. To do that, we're joined by Cooper Klein, NBA draft analyst with Upside Swings and the Chop Shop. You can follow him on Twitter at alley_oop_coop. Cooper, thanks so much for taking the time. You ready to go?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I've been basically doing nonstop NBA draft stuff for the past few days, and basically for the past few months. And this is my favorite topic of conversation is the Houston Rockets draft. So let's hop right in.
All right, let's start at the very top, because the Rockets for a third straight year have a lottery pick. They're in the top 4 yet again this year at number 4. And as I understand it from talking to people around the Rockets, after Victor Wembanyama at number 1, who is basically his own tier, there's 5 players in fairly close proximity. Scoot Henderson, Brandon Miller, Thompson, Asar Thompson, and Cam Whitmore. The Rockets are right in the middle of the 5. They pick, 4th overall, but they're 3rd amongst the next 5 picks. So they're right in the middle. You could trade up conceivably to 2 or 3. There was a report today from Jake Fisher of Yahoo Sports mentioning that as a possibility. There's also options to trade back. Michael Scotto, who we had on a pod very recently, mentioned that Orlando's looking to package 6 and 11 to move up. So you could stay where you are. You could potentially move up, although it would cost a pretty penny, I suspect, to get in that very top tier of those 5. You could also pick up some additional assets by moving back. Before we get into the scenarios, Cooper, how do you rank those 5? Scoot, Brandon, Asar, and Cam. What's your ordering before we go into the analysis?
So I will get flamed, especially on this podcast, but I have Thompson at 2.
Ooh.
At the top of that group. Him and Scoot are back to back. You cannot go wrong with either of those two, right? But I think has a slightly higher ceiling, right? So that gives him the slight edge there. After that, it goes Azar, Cam, Miller, and Azar and Cam are in a tier together, and then I have Miller as at the bottom of that group pretty solidly. I definitely prefer the other 4.
There's been some intel in the last few days that apparently Scoot had a very good workout with Charlotte. There's also the trade possibilities. The Pelicans and Zion have come up a few times. And I feel like if Charlotte goes Brandon Miller at 2, the odds are, I guess it doesn't matter at that point what Portland does, because one of your top tier, Scoot or Amen, would be on the board. In a scenario where Scoot goes to 2, there's at least a possibility that Portland or someone they trade that pick at 3-2 could conceivably take Amen, and then you go down a tier. So before we go into why you see Amen in a different tier than Paolo does, I'll let you guys hash out that discussion. How much would you panic if you're the Rockets and you start seeing the board slip to where Brandon Miller slides to you, or I guess you could still take the other Thompson twin or Cam Whitmore? In that scenario, how aggressive would you potentially be willing to move up in order to get Scooter Aman and maintain your position to get one of those 2 point guards?
So I'll start from the back. I would do anything to get one of those two. It's a big reason why I'm okay with us picking 4, honestly, is that NBA teams have a very long history of overvaluing college production, right? They see the best player in college basketball, and that is like the best player in the draft, barring somebody else. And so no matter what you think of Miller, I do think that like he has a massive boost because he played in college ball. Even if Scoot played tougher competition, played real men, played in the G League, which is way tougher than the SEC, where you play South Carolina, Mississippi State, and all that a bunch of times a year, and fake teams and whatever. But I'd much prefer to move up. I don't think like if you can't get either of them, I would just desperately be begging Portland like, hey, what do you want? I will do whatever to move up to there. And I'd also be fine moving back if they're unwilling to move off of those picks, which I get because, like, as I said, I view those two as the 2 best. And if you don't want to move off of them, you can't really do anything to change their minds. If you can move back with Orlando, get to 6 and 11. I have other guys in that range, between Ozar, Cam, and Miller that I'd be fine with taking, right, at 6 and 11. And, that I think are better fits with the current roster as well. And once you're outside of that top 3, I do think you have to consider fit, at least as a developmental, point. Like you don't like you said, you don't think about fitting with like, oh, the future, like, oh, Harden and all this and whatever. But you think about how they fit with Jalen Green and Şengün, and does that optimize their development, right? Because if it's like a Embiid and Simmons. Like, yes, they were both great players, but how much better would Simmons have been if he went to a team where he could actually be the 5-man offensively, or the point guard, and he played with a big who could pick and roll?
Right.
Like how is he where he is now if he's in that situation? I don't think he is, barring back injury. But that's a short-winded way of saying I would not stay at, or a long-winded way of saying I would not stay at 4.
Yeah. So the best way to summarize it is if the board stays the way most of the mocks have it now, which is Scoot and Brandon in some order at 2 and 3, then you're more than happy to just stand pat at 4, where most of the mocks have you getting what in your eyes is a top tier guy in Amen Thompson, or top tier in this scenario where we're taking Wemby out of play because let's be real, he's his own tier. He may as well be his own draft. We're talking about the 2023 NBA draft. It really starts at pick 2. And so if the board stays as it is, you're content to stay at 4, as opposed to if somehow Scoot and Amen end up at 2 and 3 in some order, then you either need to talk about moving up into the top 3 so you can get one of those guys, or if you can't, then that's the time that you maybe have that call with Orlando and say, yeah, let's move back because there's not that big of a delta between Brandon, Cam, and Asar.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it.
If Miller did fall to 4, that would be, so it's so unexpected at this point that I wonder what teams would be calling you at 4, because they just didn't expect to be able to trade with the team in the unique position that Houston's at. Because if they wanted to trade with Portland for Miller, they would have to have a star type player. God knows what Charlotte wants at this point. I don't know. The Rockets have very specific needs, and those are not another lengthy forward. So we have plenty of those. So I wonder how that would go. That being said, let's focus on the main price here. When I thought, well, we want to talk about draft. I want to bring in someone. I thought, well, I want some, we've had Nathan. Nathan's great. We have Madsen great. I want someone that really loves Amen Thompson, because I'm not the only one. I have Scoot in a pedestal at number 2, but it's looking more and more likely. I mean, maybe not in the last couple of days because it's been chaos for 2 days. But beforehand, we were kind of settling into okay, we gotta cope a little bit. We gotta get behind Amen Thompson. He can't be that bad. So let's bring in a guy that absolutely loves him, that knows everything about him, and let's see what's so attractive to him. So I guess I'll start with a very generic question, which will be Amen Thompson in a 90% outcome, not the absolute ceiling, but a pretty good, him panning out. What does it look like? What kind of player is he?
Well, that's, in my opinion, a 90th percentile outcome is a top 20, 15 player. Honestly, he is the best athlete in the NBA. right now, and he hasn't even touched the NBA. He is an otherworldly athlete with great feel for the game, and I just don't think that guys like that really fail. There aren't really that many guys like that in general, but I don't think that the shot at the 90th percentile outcome is anything better than like 34%, but I don't think it has to be. I think it just has to be like respectable. I think he's the best rim pressure player in the NBA other than like Fox and Shea. And even then, you can argue he's better than Fox and Shea because his first step is better and he's faster and he's quicker off the ground. He's not as crafty as those guys, but you don't need to be super duper crafty when you are literally unguardable, right? Because your burst is so good and your feel in the pick and roll is so good. He's a great playmaker on the offensive end. I think at the 90th percentile outcome, he's a top 5-10 playmaker, can make every read in the pick and roll, can make every kick out, can make every look ahead and transition. And then, the other thing that I think is kind of what's forgotten about him is that I think there is a very high chance that he's an all defensive player, like genuinely. And at his 90th percentile outcome, he's probably one of the 10-15 best defenders in the NBA. His versatility, his athleticism, he can guard basically 1 through 4 at the NBA level, like right now. He can play different roles as a defender, weak side rim protector, wing helper, just pure stopper. If he came to the Rockets, he would be the best shot blocker on the team. I firmly believe that. His instincts are better, and he's bigger than KJ. And I don't know who else. It's maybe Tari who comes close, but Tari hasn't really played in that role anymore because he's more of like the wing havoc creator. I just at his 90th percentile outcome, he's one of the best players in the NBA, full stop. And I think at his 95th, 100th percentile outcomes, I think he's the best player in the world. Maybe sub Wemby, but like guys with that level of feel, athleticism, two-way ability, they just don't exist outside of LeBron. And I do think that there are very rare worlds where he ends up hitting to that level.
Yeah, I actually agree with you. I think that the vision of what a high-end outcome for Naaman Thompson looks like, I think it's really appealing, right? Now we're talking about a guy that has all the tools to be a primary on-ball defender if need be. We're talking about a guy that can play off-ball. I think he would be even better off-ball, early on in his career, as the athleticism, has the instincts to be, to play like a wing, to play, kind of like Rocco and be able to, pick and choose his times to impact on defensive and off the ball. He does gamble a little bit, but it's okay. I'll segue this into. I want to talk about defense, but beforehand, let's talk about the thing that everybody brings up, which is the competition level and what he played at overtime elite. I actually think, and I early on, and I'm probably get flamed for this, but early on, I thought that he was just playing poor competition, and he should have shined brighter than he did. But then I went back and I watched more and more of the games. And then I went back and I looked at the stats of his teammates, right? And I'm looking at it and I'm like, I'm watching a play and I'm like, okay, he gets this kick out to the corner, but there was this kick out to, the wing that was wide open the entire play, but it didn't do it. And so then I would go and see the number of the guy because they don't put the letters on the jersey so I couldn't see them. And I go and see, and this guy can't shoot, and he's spacing out onto the perimeter. And I'm like, okay, so he knows he can't shoot, that's why he didn't pass the ball. And this happens way more often than you'd think. And I'm looking at it, and it's like, we use the competition level to take away from what Amen has been able to do. And me as someone who's all on Amen, I actually think that the competition level kind of hurt him as well. Because yes, the other team's bad, but his team is also bad. And to dominate the competition and win in the end. But what it ended up causing is, for someone that's trying to scout, first of all, most of these games are blowouts, so it's hard to judge, motor, and it's hard to judge his ability to stay consistent throughout the game because most of the games are blowouts, as I said.
Ahmed played on the worst space team that I have ever watched as a scout. Like, there was not a single shooter on that roster. The closest thing was Eli Ellis, and he was not a shooter. He was I will take a shot, or His shots did not fall at a good rate. He did not hit open shots. He just chucked everything that came into his hands and made every shot way more difficult than it needed to be. And I think that is the big thing that's missed when people are like, oh, competition level this, competition level that. He put up like, I should have pulled up his playoff numbers, but they were pretty nice. He only averaged 16, 6 and 6 for the regular season, but I think bumped that up to 17, 7 and 9 in the playoffs. Don't quote me on that, but I mean, he was dominant. He played with his brother who put up the exact same stats. He was not the only good player on this team. He facilitated. There were other guys that needed touches. He wasn't like a Gigi Jackson where he's the only guy who's anything close to resembling an NBA player on the team. He had to share the ball. There were other guys who needed usage. And I think talent-wise, OTE is a lot better than people give it credit for. It's a lot better than the teams are better than most college teams. It's just the style of play sucks. The style of play is almost useless for evaluation, but you still have to watch instincts, figure out all that kind of stuff. And I think I think you can do that. You just have to spend a lot more time than you would really want watching garbage basketball.
And then on the offensive end as well, he's limited in the types of passes that he can make, and even still, I agree with what you said earlier on. His playmaking is insane. He's able to make every pass in the book. As someone who's watched KPJ at point guard throughout the last 2 years, if there's something that I have learned, is that it's not easy for a lead guard to actually know, all of the options that he has on a given play, all of the types of passes, the whip arounds, the dump off passes, the kickouts to the corner, how you do kick out to the wing, After watching KPJ for 2 years, I start to grow more appreciation to, it's not just seeing that the guy is there and passing him the ball, it's knowing that the guy is going to be open and positioning your body in order to be able to, hit the pass in stride, in time, at the shooter's pocket and make it quick. Because how many passes have we seen out of this team so far during this rebuild where the ball makes its way there, but it takes so long, like the ball's kind of floated over to the player, or it's all the way at his feet, and you just lose all the advantage there. But I think most of all, it's also that his type of game, which is really downhill, not really much of a mid-range game, not really much of a three-point shot game, hurts him even more in a situation like that because he's the only threat, and his game is elite offensively, is elite at two things: playmaking and rim pressure, which are kind of the easier things to combat, in a poor basketball setting. Because if you can sag off all of the remaining offensive players, you can clog the lane, and there's not really that much he can do, and he still managed to make a lot happen within that situation. I want to jump onto something else, which is, and people disagree with me a lot on Twitter about this. I actually believe that early on in his career, the more you can simplify the game for him as far as creating the advantage and capitalizing on it, the better it'll be for him. And for me, that is getting a spacing center and playing 5 out. Because kind of like James Harden and Russell Westbrook when they were doing it in Houston, he's able to create the advantage by himself. And so what you want to do is, after he creates the advantage, you want to make it as simple as possible. He can make the read, so he is a passer. Making him a passer doesn't solve anything. So if he beats his man and you have someone drawing the big out of the perimeter, he's going to get a layup. And if the big helps, he's more than capable of making the correct read and hitting the open shooter. To me, this is simplifying it the most. And it's a way of not really running into the problems with his shooting and the lack of a mid-range game. To me, this way you're running into those the least out of any other circumstance. I think you disagree with that, so I'll frame the question as, why do you, if you do, and how do you think he fits with Alperen Sengun, which is to me the biggest question, because I really don't see how he projects early on to be an off-ball player.
So I think it starts with, I know that we said we're going to talk philosophy later, but it's very key to this question. And to me, I think shooting is probably the most overrated skill in basketball. That makes me sound like a bit of an idiot, but like when you just hear it on its face. But I obviously shooting is valuable. You obviously need shooting. I'm not claiming that. I just think that there is such like especially for a ball handler and for a big, which are the two positions where you don't need to shoot, right? Everybody's so obsessed with, oh, your point guard has to shoot this. Oh, you're big. If your point guard can't shoot, has to be able to space and space to the corner and do all this stuff. But I think with light movement principles, and we've seen this with the Warriors have won championships with, three shooters who play on the floor at a time, and two guys who will not take a 3-point shot or will only take a wide open one, right? I think it just requires a little bit of creativity, and motion, off-ball movement, and even like a pick and roll centric offense. I think that especially with someone like Amen, who is an elite pick and roll playmaker, arguably the best in the class, right? In the pick and roll. His pace is incredible. He can make every read. He can make every drop off. He's so quick that he will draw two. He will engage the big and then make the correct read. He can make the skip. He can make, everything, right? But I think if you put him in the pick and roll with a skilled pick and roll big like Alperen Şengün, who can make kickouts, who can, turn it into a post up, who is a really good screener, right? Like that is one of my favorite skills of Şengün's is just how good he is at taking his man out of the play. If you put elite screener and elite roller with elite pick and roll ball handler with great pace, with great, like who is the best athlete on the planet, I think good things are going to happen. You put three shooters around that, I think that's good offense. Because if you just keep the big and the guard defender moving or take one of them out of the play, you don't need 5 or 4 out, right? You can just keep guys in motion and it's easier to draw out. And I'm much more of a visual person, but I tried my best to explain it. I also think that Amen as an off-ball player is an elite cutter. He's not as good as Azar. He's not as good as like a Cam Whitmore as a cutter, but he isn't really good. His timing is really good. His recognition is great. And he's a lob threat from the back door. So if you're running like a post, like a hub Şengün, and you have Amen bring the ball up, dump it into him in the high post, and then he can, they can run a 2-man game, they can run a DHO. I think that it's impossible to sag on the best athlete in the NBA and a guy who can get to the rim from anywhere on the floor, right? Like it's two guys who, if you give them a runway or any amount of space, they are getting to the rim. And so you have to guard up, right? It's the same issue that, people like, you can't sag on Giannis, right? Or he's just going to find a way to get in there and like get up a shot because he's so much more athletic. And if you give him a runway, you're screwed unless you are perfectly executing a defense. And I think Amen's a better playmaker than Giannis at this stage in his career and arguably than he is right now, right? Like if you build a wall against Amen, he's going to make the right read. Like I think it's a lot simpler and a lot more complicated, is a kind of stupid way of putting it with Amen's lack of shooting and Şengün's lack of shooting as well.
One of the things that really interests me about Amen, he seems to check a lot of character boxes both on and off the floor. Everyone that's really worked with him seems to rave about his work ethic. He has no injury red flags. He lives and breathes basketball. And so there's so many ways in which that can bring positive results. Certainly, you don't have to worry about him off the floor, it sounds like. But on the floor, he's someone that isn't going to, I suppose, check out. You mentioned that he's an elite cutter. So if he's off the ball, even if he's not a shooter, he's not going to be one of those guys that says, well, it's not my possession. And of course, he eventually projects into being a point guard. But I'm talking about early in his career when he may have to divvy up the on-ball responsibilities a bit more, at least until he's established. So the fact that he has the work ethic and a sense of humility to, relentlessly cut off the ball, that's not a skill set that every super athletic point guard has. And so to me, I know you can never say for sure until you get these guys in the NBA, but it sounds like he's someone that's really dedicated to his craft and the kind of guy that you can trust to give, peak effort, which is a huge part of maximizing that athleticism, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, you probably read the quote today or yesterday about how he and his brother, people are like worried that they're like sleeping in the gym or like in the locker room. Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. Yeah, it's like these guys are sickos, right? In the best possible way. And at the end of the day, I think just like to make it as simple as possible, I'm not going to bet against the best athlete in the world, who is one of the most high field players I've ever watched, who is also one of the hardest working and highest motor players I've ever watched. Like if you're going to bet against that guy, I think 99 out of 100 times you're going to be wrong, right? And I think that's my simplest reasoning here with Amin.
Okay, so readdressing a little bit of what you said about him and Şengün, right? You mentioned the Warriors often, and that's a great point. They basically worked with just 3 shooters and 2, for the most of the time, defensive bigs in Draymond and call it Looney, call it whoever you want. There's 2 things about that, right? Which is, first of all, they had, the 2 of the greatest shooters of all time, which means that, if you go under the screens or if you are not just as tight as you can possibly be, they are going to shoot over you and they are going to punish that, which makes it harder to, just give space to the other guys. So to me, it's the versatility of having just Curry and Clay as just guys that can shoot in any circumstance from anywhere in any type of movement. And then my other question is, do you think so? This kind of is a little bit of a philosophy question as well, which is that reduces the flexibility that you have of running different types of things. What do you value more on a team? A team that has a lot of different weapons, and so it's really hard to prepare for them because they can go to a lot of different types of systems, or a team that has one system that's basically unstoppable? To me, what's the best team playbook building strategy? To have something that's so good that people know it's coming, and that's what you're aiming for with Amen, and you just can't stop it? Or is it better to have, flexibility in the ways that you play, so that, you can if something's not working, you can go to something else?
Okay, so I'll start with the Warriors stuff and then I'll transition over to that second question. But I think like what's so genius about the Warriors offense is that the principles still work even if you don't have a Steph and a Clay, right? Like they use their bigs as the screener, because then the big isn't playing at the level and you're completely relying on Steph's defender to fight through a screen, right? You're basically turning it into a free 2-on-1 with, a great shooter. And the other part of that is that I really do buy Jalen and Jabari as elite shooters, right? I think Jabari is going to be one of the best shooters on the planet at 7 foot tall. And I think Jalen is like an elite shot creator. He's 6'6", and the threat of, oh, I can get to the rim whenever I want, I can score in the mid range, I can score from 3, like being that level of 3-level scorer on and off the ball also really unlocks Amen, right? So I think there's a lot of like different factors that go into really liking how Amen fits on this roster in general. But to answer your second question, I'm gonna cheap out. I'm gonna say that for stars, I want you to dominate in one way and create easy buckets. And just like, if you can't create an easy bucket, then you're probably not a star, is my philosophy on the offensive end. And for role players and on the defensive end, I want as many options as possible, right? So I want the Jabari Smiths of the world as my role players. I want you to be able to stretch out. I want you to be able to attack closeouts. I want to have, different types of wings, different looks from the wings. I want Tari. I want a Kobe Buffkin to spoil, some later talk. I want a bunch of different looks from my role players who can fit next to that one dominant offensive style of Amen and Jalen on and off ball playing off of Şengün, doing all this different stuff. Heavy pick and roll. And the beauty is that Amen's defensive versatility means that he fits into both of those molds, right? So he fits in as the star. I want somebody to be dominant and just impose their will and get a ton of easy buckets. But then defensively, he can play any position you want him to. If you don't have a point of attack defender in a certain lineup, Amen can do that. If you don't have a weak side rim protector with a different lineup, Amen can do that. He can play everything in between. And honestly, I think there's like worlds where you're running him as your pseudo 5 as the screener and as like a switch center, just like hold your own and we're going to gas the offense and just try crazy shit. So I really like Amen is the best of both worlds, in my opinion, when it comes to team building. And I don't think he's as limiting as he's made out to be, because versatility is a lot more than just shooting.
Interesting. That makes sense. I think you made a really good point as far as the guys that are on the roster right now. I think once Jalen and Jabari, get their feet under them as far as shooting wise, Jalen more because of shot selection, Jabari just because. I mean, who knows? I'm completely clueless as to what went wrong with Jabari's shot.
Because he's an 18-year-old boy.
That plays into it. That plays into it. So I actually think those two, when they actually, start being good shooters and get their feet under them and get older, I think their shots are actually very versatile. I think Jalen's, comes a little bit. He has gotten better at it, but comes a little bit from the chest. But it's still a really quick to get off shot, and has he is able to get enough power from it to shoot from really deep range. And I think Jabari, as a 7-foot shooter, is also really versatile, and he's really good at, or he projects to be really good at squaring his shoulders and even shooting a foot movement. I think he'll be able to do it eventually. So I think that's a really good point. I loved your point on Amen Thompson, being the versatile on defense, which is the philosophy that you like, but then being that or having the potential to be that, but that unstoppable, right, offensively, that you can just run the same thing over and over, and the other team's either going to have to completely fully commit to it, and he has the playmaking to punish it, or they're not going to be able to stop it. I want to touch on one more thing that you said about Amen off ball and how you said you think shooting's a little bit overrated, and you think, or no, rather than that, you talked about when running pick and roll or dribble handoffs that you can't sag all the way back from Amen because he has the athleticism to punish you and just go over you. And I could agree with that. And it is the same thing that happens with Giannis. He's just going to bulldoze people over. And even without the best touch in the world, even though Giannis is lengthier, and so he'll get dunks more often and he'll be closer to the rim, so it's easier for him to finish. The problem becomes, and it's a problem for Giannis as well, he could be more dominant than he already is. The problem becomes free throw shooting, because you're going to draw a lot of fouls. And I think most of the time when you're in a position where you're running headfirst into the defense with the head of steam, you're going to, especially in today's NBA, you're going to draw a lot of fouls. And Amen is like, what, a 66, 67% free throw shooter?
He was up to 69 with the playoffs.
Okay, 69 is fine. It's almost fine, but okay, maybe I take it back, but still, that's something that I'm not too sure about, right? Because it would feel a lot better if you told me, oh, he can't shoot, but he's going to use his size and his rim pressure to get to the line a lot, and once he gets to the line, he's gonna punish you that way. It really scares me, a situation where maybe he gets in his own head, or maybe since he isn't a knockdown free throw shooter anyway, where they just keep fouling him, and kind of like what happened with Giannis at points in his career. The time he won the NBA championship was the time when he shot, I think, the best free throws wise in the playoffs. And so it's kind of scary to rely so much on your downhill pressure when you're not that great of a free throw shooter. And that's one of the beauties with Jalen, even though Jalen's smaller and not as powerful of an athlete, which is crazy to say because Jalen's an incredible athlete. You can trust him that if he draws the foul, and he didn't early on in his career, but we've seen as last year progressed, a big deal is he draws a foul, but he can actually knock down the free throws, a 79% free throw shooter or something of the sort. So it's kind of scary with Amen, the fact that he isn't a great free throw shooter when he does get those looks. Could you see an outcome where that's a problem?
So no. I think if he was a 55% free throw shooter, then yes, I would agree with you, and I would understand where you were coming from. The problem is that he's at almost 70, and with his work ethic, and I mean, he has improved as a shooter. I don't have the numbers in front of me because it's impossible to find OTE numbers unless you really know where to look. But even when you do look, they're not very reliable. But the best estimate I've seen is that he's at 69, and I think he's improved over the last few years, and I don't see any reason why that shouldn't continue to improve. I also think that the confidence stuff, I think that guys like Ben Simmons have really skewed our perception of that. Ben Simmons is the outlier. He is not the norm, right? His mentality has always been in question, all this different stuff. There are so many things that individually should not have happened that went wrong in Ben Simmons' career that caused this to happen. And Giannis, eventually, he took so many free throws that he got over it, right? And when you're that good at getting to the line, I think eventually you take enough free throws where you get over it, especially when you have that mentality where you really care and you are dedicated to your craft and you will not stop, right? I just, especially with good shooting coaches that, we have here now, I don't see any reason why you shouldn't get up to 75% from the free throw line. And at that point, if you are hitting 3/4 of your free throws and you're taking, 8 to 9 a game, and you're like, that's 6 easy points, right? I think
even at 69%, I mean, what's that in points per possession? Like 1.2, like 1.19. Yeah, something like that. So it's still a good outcome for a possession. It's more of a, in certain situations, teams might want to live with that, but it mostly comes from this mentality issues. And I think Amen and All-Star really have that stuff down. I saw them Instagram. I mean, they grew up in Oakland and they're now Warriors fans. So if that doesn't attest for their mentality, I don't know what you want to attest for their mentality. But speaking of their work ethic, right? And this is something that I brought up on Twitter, and a lot of people said that sometimes these guys just don't have the right backing or don't have the right coaches making decisions or helping them make decisions on this regard. But if these guys are always in the gym, how come that the shooting is still so much of an issue? But while it's been an issue for a while now, and they know this is what stops them. I think if they are shooting 36% from three, they may be in the conversation with Wemby. That's how high the upside is. And so knowing that that's what may limit them and they're as hard workers as they are, how come that's still an issue?
So 2 things. One, I think coming into OTE, these were 2 of the rawest players on the entire planet, like for their age. Like as far as 18-year-old basketball players who are gunning to be lottery picks, they were so insanely raw. Basically, all they did was dunk the ball and leak out in transition and all that stuff. They really have developed a lot at OTE, and the shot has improved. It just hasn't gotten to the level where it's passable because for their entire life, they never had to shoot, right? If you're 16 playing AAU, what is more efficient, to shoot your 27% jump shot or to go get the automatic dunk, right? Yep. And I think that's part of it. And then the second part is like I said, I think they have improved. It's just that the level that they've come from and the level they've gotten to is like they started as some of the worst, like most raw players on the planet, and have gotten to, okay, they're still pretty bad, but there's like, you see the hope there, right? You kind of see like they've gotten better.
So you're saying it's their age and them being 20 is actually, and still being, qualified as high upside prospects. It's mostly because they started from way further back than most 18-year-olds would be, and not because, they worked on flaws and they've been struggling to get through them. But that's mostly what you're saying, right?
Yes. So it's that, and it's the fact that they have the athletic tools to actually like reach star end outcomes, right? I think every single star in the NBA is some kind of an elite athlete, right? And they are raw, but it's a lot easier to develop someone into a star when they're actually able to become a star and you're not like projecting something falsely onto them. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that fully makes sense, but I hope you're getting my point.
So bottom line, if you're looking at Amen and you're looking at Scoot, and I know for playmaking reasons, that's why you have them at the top of that tier of 5. What is it that distinguishes Amen? Is it the additional length and thus the defensive versatility that he has that Scoot doesn't? Since I know you're somewhat of an outlier in having Amen above Scoot, is it the length and the defensive impact that maybe gives Amen a slight edge? Just explain the difference there.
Yeah, so I think like the simple, like the very mainstream way to look at it is Scoot's like the higher floor, Amen's the higher ceiling, right? And I think that's true. But I also think just elite defensive versatility, the 6'7" length, automatic rim pressure, elite playmaker with high feel is still a very good floor, right? Like I think their floors are closer than people think, even if Scoots is still higher because of the shot. And but I think that the 6'7", the size, and the gap on defense. So Amin is so much better than Scoot on defense, and Scoot is like slightly better in my mind than Amin on offense, right? And it's that plus Amin's just slightly higher ceiling that really have him, slightly above Scoot, even though they are back to back. If we took Scoot at 2, if we traded up to 2 and took Scoot, I'm not complaining at all. I think they're both incredible, but I do slightly prefer Amin.
Okay, so just a quick yes or no question. Moving forward, right, and then with Ben Sullivan as the shooting coach, and I think they brought on one more shooting coach. I can't remember his name off the top of my head.
It's Cam Hodges from the Clippers, by the way.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Ben. Do you think current jump shot, is it a scratch and build from the ground up, or do you think the current jump shot is something that they can work with towards something that may resemble it right now, but with a lot of fixes?
Yeah, I think the jump shot's fixable. I think there are obvious issues, and if you fix those issues, it can get to passable. I think the touch is solid, and I buy it getting to passable at some point.
All right, so I want to circle back to something you said a few minutes ago, talking about their ages. Both the Thompson twins are at 20, and that's a source of concern for some people. But as I see it, I think it's almost too simplistic, the focus that a lot of the draft community has on ages, because so much of it is circumstantial. I'll use an example that's very near and dear to me. Kobe Brown is a prospect that, while I don't think he makes sense for the Rockets, I'm very high on him. I think I've helped get Madison Moore high on him as well, as maybe even a late first-round pick. He gets a lot of skepticism because he's 23 years old. But what people who don't follow University of Missouri basketball seem to know is that the first 4 years that Kobe was there, the sets they ran on offense under Cuonzo Martin were archaic. There was very little spacing. There was very little structure. And this year, which was his 5th at Mizzou, Dennis Gates playing a 5-out offense that had ideal spacing, played with pace and gave him the space to operate. It really allowed him to do a lot of things for the first time. Sure, there were some shooting improvements, and the big question with Kobe is the 45% shooting from 3 real? But even if it's not to that extent, certainly he worked on it, and there's things he did himself. But a lot of it too is just circumstantial. And so even though he's older, I do think that a lot of his growth would have been shown at a younger age if he hadn't been playing for a coach who, in fairness to Cuonzo Martin, a very good defensive coach, but offensively a bit behind the times in regards to some of his sets. And the reason I bring that up is there's a lot of talk when we look at the top of the first round and the guys at the Rockets range, certainly the Thompson twins who are 20 versus Cam Whitmore, who's just 18, there's this assumption that the guys who are younger inherently have more upside. My personal opinion is that that's not necessarily the case, because you have to take into account some of the unique circumstances of each situation, like you were just outlining with the Thompsons. So when you go into this process as a scout, how much deference do you give to just the age number by these guys, and how much of it is a combination of age with the particular circumstances of a player's career that may either, I guess, accelerate their development or perhaps have it lag by a couple of years relative to the norm?
So age for me is really tough, because originally when I started out a few years ago, I was very into you have to be super young to be super upside and all this stuff. And the more I've done it, I think the main way that age is a factor for me is if you're really young and really good, right? If you are 18 and you're dominating, then you're probably going to dominate at 20 and 21 and up until your 20s. It's the Franz Wagner, Moses Moody thing, where those two are super young, some of the best players in college basketball, and play on the wing. So they're probably going to be good. I'm not to me, I have Cam below Azar, even though Azar is older, because Azar is better, right? And he's a better athlete, and he's higher feel. He's just better at basketball right now. And I definitely started leaning more towards just is this guy good at basketball? And not just the example I would use from this year is Gigi Jackson. Gigi Jackson is currently not a very good basketball player in like any way, but because he's the youngest player in the class, people just like give him a nod. It's fine. He has the flashes. It's whatever. But if Gigi was like solidly efficient and scoring well on on a team in the SEC, like if he was up at like 53% true shooting or something on that garbage South Carolina team, then I'd be like, oh, now the age really means something because there's so much more time for him to just get better, right? Like we tend to overthink guys who are just young and good, and we tend to underthink guys who are young and bad. So I hope that answers your question.
That's a great way of putting it. So let's move a little bit into scouting principles and some of the stuff that you look for in your when you're doing your draft boards. Because I mean, I saw this last year. Last year, you were someone who was really high on Tyrese, and rightfully so. I was as well. I mean, but now I'm looking at your board for this year, right? And I'm trying to find something in common or like a thread that runs through all these prospects that is in common, and I can't. So just from a general, surface level, I mean, not really surface level, we can get into it if you want, but what are you looking for in prospects, and what makes, for an example, what makes a guy like Sensabaugh, or, I mean, Nick Smith, not so much because he's a special case, but Sensabaugh or Cason Wallace be as high as they are on your board?
So to me, it's outside of the top three. I guess I'm just gunning for somebody who I buy being super elite at something and good enough at everything else. Nick Smith is the outlier there. I have him at 4, but a lot of that is because of his high school film, right? He showed so much more in high school. He dealt with all the injuries this year that give me a lot of reason to like hand wave the numbers, hand wave the percentages, the assist percent, whatever. And the flashes were still there to where I still buy the high school tape is real. But with someone like Bryce Sensabaugh, I think I buy him honestly for a lot of the same reasons people really buy a Brandon Miller, right? It's like he can really shoot, he can really self-create, he can, and those are such easy skills to build off of. And I think at the top of the draft, I'm looking for, can you do something at an elite level? Bryce Sensabaugh can shoot and score at an elite level. Nick Smith has the best touch in the class. Cason Wallace is an elite on and off ball defender. Ant Black is an elite playmaker and an elite defender, and does a lot of things at a really high level. Even like Amin and Azar and Whitmore are elite athletes. And then other than that, I'm looking for guys who, like I said, are younger and already produce. So that's like Kobe Buffkin, Grady Dick, Leonard Miller, even a Brandon Podziemski, just guys who produce at a really high level at a really young age. And those are going to be the like that and elite skills plus, pretty good at everything else is what I'm going to bet on at the top of the draft. I don't have like one thorough line. Like you said, I try to evaluate every single player on an individual basis, right? If I was just like, hey, this is my philosophy and this is how I'm going to do my board, it would look very different.
But I do think you pointed out a thread throughout all those guys, though. I can agree. I mean, there are some exceptions like Nick Smith, but for the most part, when you focus on one, signature trait, all of these guys did produce really well, and all of them are young. And I could follow your thought process across all these names and think, yeah, these guys produced, these guys are young, and especially they produced at what their projected elite skill is. So I can totally see where you're coming from then. So from that perspective, then, what makes a guy like Dariq Whitehead, who produced as a shooter, not be higher on your board considering he's really young?
So Dariq, I really like I have him at 16. I know for some people that's lower, for some people that's higher. I really do like the high school film. He has really big worries for me, and it's the handle. The handle is the big one. He cannot dribble. His handle, he will bobble it off his feet. He will Eric Gordon it off his inner thigh. He will do everything in between, and he just cannot control it. It's been an issue since he was a sophomore in high school, and since I've watched him since then, right? Like, it is not an issue that he's fixed. And I really like him, right? Like, I still really buy him as a shooter, as like kind of a shot creator whenever he doesn't have to dribble very much, and as a defender. But I really like players who can dribble. I think it's really hard to find guys who can dribble at an NBA level. And that's part of the reason why I have someone like Podziemski ahead of Brandon Miller and ahead of Derek, because I don't think Miller and Whitehead's handles are really at an NBA level, right? And I don't think handle is super improvable other than like small fixes here and there, right?
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. So I said not that high. He is 16th on your board, so it's still high compared to consensus. I have him a little bit higher, but I was trying to compare high by your philosophy. If I was following your philosophy, I would have him even higher. So another guy that's really good at one thing and was fairly productive in college, but kind of lacks on the 8th department from the criteria that you were naming, is Jordan Hawkins. So why is he 34th?
So Jordan Hawkins misses on the other key part, which is like passable at everything else, or like okay to good at everything else. Jordan Hawkins has no other skill than shooting, right? He's very good at shooting. I'd probably have him in my top 5 to 6 as a shooter. He's tall. He can come off of motion. He's the best motion shooter in the draft for sure. But he can't dribble. He can't pass. He's a really bad defender. He doesn't project to like get bigger and become a good defender. His instincts aren't there. He just doesn't do anything else at a super high level, right? And Andy's a little bit older. And like I said, shooting without other skills is kind of overrated and ends up leading to like Corey Kispert's being taken in the lottery. And I like Hawkins more than I liked Kispert and the guy who went to the Celtics, whose name I can't remember now. And that's embarrassing. But right,
Nesmith.
Yeah, Nesmith. Just like guys like that, I think just being able to shoot ends up leading to more guys like that being taken. And I'm not the biggest fans of those kinds of picks. And Hawkins kind of fits that to a T for me.
Okay, so one of my favorite guys, and I know you very highly disagree on it. What's so bad about Derek Lively II that makes him be 30th?
He has 2 skills, and he's very good at those 2 things. He's a great rotational shot blocker, and he's a great lob finisher. His production was very bad, right? Like his rate stats are fine, but his totality stuff is really, really bad. And his touch around the rim as a finisher is bottom tier. He is the most massive person on the court every single time he plays. And he is the worst layup finisher on the court every single time he plays. And that's really worrying to me for a big man. Even in his prime, how many of his finishes, of Clint Capella's finishes, were dunks as compared to layups, right? I would say most of Clint's layups, even next to Harden, most of Clint's finishes next to Harden were layups, right? No matter how good you are at dunking the ball, you're still going to have to lay it up a lot. It's just a fact of life. And I don't think Lively's good at that. I also think a lot of like elite rim runners also do other stuff at lower levels and then kind of scale back to just do the rim running stuff. And like I was watching some Clint Capella youth film. A friend of mine posted it on the timeline. You should check it out. I think I retweeted it. He is like shooting passing lanes, dribbling in the full court, hitting turnaround mid ranges, like. These elite rim runners show flashes of other things at lower levels.
Wait, Clint? No way.
Yeah, the youth Clint film is crazy, man.
Dude has the worst touch I've ever seen.
No, I mean it's just like it's really easy. Like if you're really dominant in like a role like that, like it's really easy to be like, oh, it's just dunking and rim protecting. It's like there's so many niche little things that go into that you have to be good at. And I don't think Lively is good at any of them other than just rotational shot blocking and being big and catching lobs. And those are useful. And I think he'll be in the NBA for a long time because of them. He's massive. He gets off the floor super quickly. But if that's all you do, you're just kind of a second round pick to me. and that's how I have him ranked. I mean, he's solid. He's fine. I just don't love it in the top lotto like some people.
On the subject of bigs, and I'm not meaning this to be critical, just want to put a balanced picture out there. Tari Eason was a big success story for you last year, but amongst the big men, I know you were low on Walker Kessler, who it's still early in his career, but he ended up being, an all rookie first team guy. What do you take out of, I guess, his early success? Is there something that you underestimated? I know that's part of, I mention it now because we're talking about, scouting principles. Is there something about Kessler as a big? I know his archetype is not Derek Lively, but is there something about him that maybe you undervalued that now you're putting into your analysis of this year's class?
So Walker Kessler is so I do something very specific with my boards every year, and I think big boards are a lot more nuanced than a lot of people like pretend. Like some people are like, if you don't hit on the exact order of how valuable each of these guys is by VORP, then your board is a failure. It's like
Yeah.
that's just not how it works, right? Like it's kind of a snapshot of how I view basketball at a certain point in time, right? And at that point in time, Kessler was, as a prospect, a block chasing, lob finishing big who pretended to be a stretch big. And people looked at the defensive rebound percentage and the block percentage, and that was like, wow, this guy is going to be a stud. And it's like, well, when you watch the film, he gives up tons of easy layups because he block chases. He can't screen. He doesn't really roll very well. He's just massive. So, I mean, if you're just like putting pure value on Kessler, like, sure, he is a top 20, or like top 5 right now by just pure value. If you just look at the stats, he is a top 5 player from his draft class because stats don't paint the full picture, right? Like he played a tiny role. He was just a drop big who just caught lobs and rebounded the ball and was just massive. And it's a lot easier to just be massive than it is to have skill. He was a much better player than Jabari Smith and Jaden Ivey this year. But if you said, oh, I would rather have Walker Kessler long term than Jaden Ivey and Jabari Smith, you would be an idiot. Right? Like that's just kind of how I look at it. And I've been flamed because I did have him way too low by just value. Right. But that's, like I said, that's just not exactly how my board is. Last year, I was very particular about if all you do is shoot or all you do is be big, then I don't value you. So I moved those guys even lower than I probably should have on my board. And I've adjusted a bit this year. I think someone like Lively, like last year, I would have had him even lower. and it's like,
yeah, that's why I was thinking about it. Yeah.
Like there is value in being big. There is value in just shooting. And you can say, I don't value that as much without saying, oh, I don't value this at all. Right. And I think I overcorrected for that last year. And this year I'm trying to be more holistic about it and like in a way where I don't have to explain this every single time somebody asks me about Walker Kessler. Because it's like, yes, it makes sense to me, but 99% of people aren't going to take the time to ask. And they're just going to think I'm an idiot because I had Walker Kessler in the 80s.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's a very personal thing that I had him that low, and it makes a very specific point about my philosophy. And this year, I think I've cut that out to just be more accessible and understandable.
So one thing that I think is definitely admirable about your approach, you're not afraid to stick your neck out. Even when we were talking earlier about the guys at the top of the draft, to have Amon basically number 2 right behind Wemby, and you mentioned, if he gets 3-point stroke up to just the mid 30s, maybe even on par with Wemby, that elite of a prospect, if you can get the shooting to a passable level. And Brandon Miller, of course, far lower than the consensus. You talk about Derek Lively as someone that you have far lower than the consensus. One of the big problems I feel like in modern draft analysis is groupthink. There's so much fear amongst a lot of people to be on an island that it leads to a lot of analysis basically mirroring what's already out there. And in the case of NBA teams, look, say what you will, but these guys are doing their own analysis. They're being paid full-time salaries to dedicate their lives to that. And the scouting boards aren't going to reflect. You're going to have some pretty big misses sometimes because those guys are actually doing their own independent analysis, which is why in an ideal world, the scouting world would do that as well. It's just, I think there's so much of a temptation to be risk averse and avoid the criticism for a scenario like you just laid out where, you have Walker Kessler in the 80s on your board, then he ends up being an all rookie first team guy in year one. There's a lot of people that just won't take that risk. And while it avoids any sort of major personal liability for them, at the same time, it doesn't really paint a truly comprehensive picture as to just how fluid the process is and what teams are considering. Because I think with teams, there's the one thing I hear back when I check in with people from the Rockets and around the league is that there is so much more uncertainty than the mainstream mocks would lead you to believe. The mainstream mocks have it to where there's a certain amount of guys that make sense for certain picks, and people that are actually involved in this process say you would not believe how many guys we are seriously considering at a given point, especially once you get past the top 5 or 10. So I think one thing about you, certainly like any draft analyst, you have your hits, you have your misses, but it seems pretty clear like you make a conscientious effort to make sure that you're doing your own analysis and that you're not factoring in too much what you're seeing from mocks elsewhere and trying to conform to them. What is the secret to doing that? And is that hopefully something that we're going to see more of amongst the draft community moving forward?
Okay, so I think I have a 3-part answer for you here. First part is kind of a little secret, is a lot of NBA teams are way more factor in consensus, like the mainstream mocks. The bad drafting teams take that stuff into consideration. The 3 best drafting teams in the NBA are the 3 teams that completely ignore it. And that's the Rockets, the Heat, and the Grizzlies, right? No matter what you want to say, I think those are the 3 best drafting teams in the league. And those are the teams that I have heard just do not listen to that kind of stuff and are not influenced by it at all, right? The second part is, to me, like I genuinely don't consume very much draft content out of just watching like film. I think that's like part of it, is as I've grown as an evaluator, I read people I know's stuff, but I don't listen to other draft podcasts because I tend to just find myself just disagreeing with them and being like, well, actually, I don't think that's right. Or, oh, this makes sense. And why would I listen to the exact same thought that I have in my head? Right. The only stuff I really consume at this point is ESPN's stuff because it's more intel based. Right. And I think ESPN, for all their flaws, has pretty good intel. And I like having intel. I don't factor it into my own evaluation, but I really think that's the secret. The secret is just do your own work and don't be concerned at all with consensus, because once you start to even reading other boards, structures this in your mind as, oh, this is the starting point, and then, oh, I have Brandon Miller lower, so I move him down, instead of just, oh, I build my board is called my 2023 running board because I build it as I go, right? As I deep dive all these guys, I just slot them in where I think they go, and then I continue to slot guys in between each other, instead of oh, here's this ESPN board, and oh, I'll have Wemby at 1, Scoot at 2, and then, oh, I don't like Amon that much, so I'll move him down to 5, and that'll move all these other guys up, right? And the third part, I think, is that the guys who think like this, at least historically, seem to have been picked up by NBA teams like the Rockets. Like the Rockets scouting department is made up of a lot of the old draft Twitter people who
very much so
who thought like this, right? And think individually and don't really pay that much attention to consensus. And I think a lot of the people who do really listen to consensus and intel end up being more of media people. And that's one isn't better than the other. It just tends to be how it is. Because if you listen more to other voices, NBA teams can get that from ESPN. Why would they hire you? They want somebody who thinks differently. They want an edge in the draft. They don't want the same old, same old.
inspired by that, I'm going to move Podzinski into my top 12. I'm
welcome.
kind of joking and kind of not, because I remember, and I didn't throw out a lot of boards this year, but I remember before anybody had this guy first round, I had this guy like 27th, and I wanted to put him like top 16, but then nobody had him top 16, and I'm like, well, is there something I'm not seeing? Is it the athleticism? Is athleticism that limiting? This guy's so good at everything else. And I remember Jalen Williams, and I thought how much he reminds me of Jalen Williams. Less athletic, but just the style of play, just the really in control, being a really good all-around player. And that made me put him first round. But I didn't have the guts to put him all the way where I wanted to put him, just because of people were going to. I don't know. I really agree with what you said. It's sad that we're moving kind of past draft section for the Rockets of their rebuild. I mean, at least I hope we are, because that would be a bad sign if we weren't.
I think the beauty of the draft is that the middle ground is not the Daryl Morey way where you make no selections, and it's not the so far rebuild way where you only make selections. I think it's the Grizzlies way, where you make good selections every year and then you cycle in cheap role players and you trade who doesn't work. And I think you want to use the draft, but you don't want to overuse it or underuse it. I think
the Grizzlies do it so really weirdly.
Beautiful. Yeah, they do. It's kind of annoying. Like, oh, let's trade D'Anthony Melton for David Roddy, and it's like, could have just kept Melton. He's like really good.
Especially because once you are a good team and you're scouting for a good team, at least what I would do is I would be looking for guys that can really fill a role, and they go for a lot of like out of left field guys that are good at a lot of little things, like Roddy, for example, like Tillman, for example, just guys that I wouldn't call them specialists, but they go after them and they play a role for them, which is, and I mean, fair play to the Grizzlies. They find a way to make Kyle Anderson a really useful player, and I think of most systems in the NBA would struggle to make him, because it's so star-based, that would struggle to make him as useful as he was for the Grizzlies. But yeah, their philosophy is so weird. It's them and the Jazz. Both of those, I think the Jazz doesn't work for them, but they just draft guys that I've never heard of, and they end up always being useful. I wonder I wonder what the Grizzlies scouting team consists of. Is it old draft Twitter guys as well?
I think it is, as far as I know. I think it's at least a few draft Twitter guys, or they were some of the first to like hop on to like, oh, maybe we should actually read what draft Twitter is saying, right? The secret to the Jazz actually is that they're the most analytically based front office in, at least as far as the draft. And I think as far as like actual NBA goes, like there's the story Udoka Azubuike from a few years ago, who their analytics department had at number 2 on their boards because his block and rebound rates were out of this world. And it's like, well, if you actually watched a second of film, you'd realize he's too slow to play in the NBA. Like, what are you, like, you're missing completely the forest.
Who are we talking about?
The Jazz and Udoka Azubuike.
Oh, I remember who that guy is. Oh, yeah. I do remember who that guy is.
They took him at like 21 or 26 or something, and they could have gotten him at like 40. But their analytics.
I remember.
Yeah, their analytics. Yeah, it was really. It was
but that draft sucked overall.
Well, yeah, but they could have Bane. I think like that was the Bane.
Yeah, they could have.
If I recall correctly.
They could have. They did. They took him. Wait, what is he? I'm trying to find. Oh, they took him 27th. I mean, it's a little bit lower, but I remember looking at mocks back then, because this is the year for reference for the listeners. This is the year where the Rockets traded Covington and got pick 16 like a week before the draft, and so everybody was rushing to do scouting work for the first time in like God knows how many years. And then the draft came, and they traded the pick away for a future pick, and it was like really disappointing. But this is my very early on, starting to look into rookie prospects, because it was useless on the Daryl Morey era. And I remember from this draft, I loved Jalen Smith because I thought he was going to be Capella with a jump shot.
Hey, that was me in 2018 with Mo Bamba. So I had Bamba 3 that year, and that was my first year like scouting. It was not a good year, but I did have 1. So,
and I remember not being that high on Jaden McDaniels, who's been killing it with the Timberwolves because I thought he was a typical length guy that can't do anything else. So let's not talk about my past draft analysis from my first year because, well, that isn't great. I did call Halliburton. I loved him, but other than that, it was pretty terrible. Let's get into this draft again and talk about pick 20 for the Rockets. In case they make it, we've talked about a lot of the guys that might be able in that rank that you like. But what about specifically for the Rockets? Because I don't think they go BPA here at this point. So who do you like for us?
So that is a very open question. I love a lot of guys. 20, I think, is the make or break pick for is Stone good at drafting, in my opinion. I really like Tari. I think no matter what you think of Şengün, he was the best value at 16, right? Like you were not going to get a more
Trey Murphy.
Şengün right now has more value than Trey Murphy. Maybe we should have taken Trey Murphy for like a few years down the line, but I think Şengün at least looks to be a star. Trey Murphy is a shooter, but Tari, love the Tari pick. But then you look at Jacob, you look at Tai, Usman's questionable. I think 20 is going to really seal the deal here on whether Stone is actually a good drafter. I think we could see this is like the bottom end of Nick Smith's range, honestly, because people hate him for some reason because of the injuries and stuff. I could see this. I would love to see Leonard Miller if he falls to this range. I think he's a star bet hiding in plain sight. My dream pick, personally, selfishly, is Kobe Buffkin out of the University of Michigan. I've been getting bullied a bit because he's a guard, but I think he's an elite off-ball shooter and player who I would just love to see on this Rockets roster. Wow, a complimentary wing who's super young, can shoot, can drive, and can really defend. We haven't had one of those in years. I really love Buffkin. I would also love to see Brandon Podziemski. I think he could really reach his full potential as a connector or a point guard here. And there's a few more, but who do you guys like here at this 20 pick?
I've come around on the shooting, and that's just based on the roster as it is. It's tough to say 100% how this roster is going to be constructed a week from now, but Maxwell Lewis is someone that I've come around on. I know you're a bit lower on him, but Jordan Hawkins, I think in a world where you're looking pretty deep and you're going to sign a number of free agents, a high floor shooter is something that has a lot of appeal to me, especially because they can fit in a lot of different constructs. Part of it too, it's difficult for me to have like a guy here since I don't know who the Rockets are truly targeting in free agency. I think the team does, and so they can sort of slide in with that. It'd be easier for me to narrow in on, a certain need if I knew, okay, these are the positions that are going to be filled in free agency, as opposed to now it's sort of like, well, I don't know how. And of course, not that you're expecting a rookie at 20 to play a lot in year one anyway, but just in terms of how they fit over the next 2 or 3 years, I think one of the shooters can potentially have a lot of utility. We can throw Buffkin into the mix there as well. I'm coming around on him for sure. Jet Howard, that's Paolo's boy. Certainly he fits that criteria as well. Just someone that can sort of plug and play in a lot of different scenarios given the instability of this roster. Paolo, who did you want to add that I haven't already mentioned?
I think if Tariq Whitehead's there, I think you've got to take him. As you said, I really like Jet Howard. The fan in me wants Marcus Sasser. But then those are, and I really, really like Podziemski. And I think he comes in, and I think he wows everyone in training camp. And I think he plays minutes day one because I think he's ready. And I think that type of player has very little use going to the G League and spending a year there. Which does it make sense to lean on younger and more unproven like G.G. Jackson, who I see that you don't really like that much? But do you lean more on that because you think that they're not, because you have the time to do so and you think that they're not going to play, so they might as well spend a year in the G League and you're not that hurt by it? Do you take that into consideration, or do you just, you get the best guy and eventually you'll have the space for him to play, even if he has to spend 1 or 2 years in the G League?
It comes back to my philosophy. I think I would rather take Kobe Buffkin than Gigi Jackson 100 times out of 100, right? Because Buffkin is like only a year older, but infinitely better at basketball, right? Like he is better at, I would say he's better at every single thing on the basketball floor than Gigi is right now. And I don't think 1 year of basketball is going to change that for Gigi, right? And I would rather Kobe Buffkin go look way too good in the G League for a year than, Gigi, let's see if you're even an NBA player in a few years, right? I think it's more justifiable to have somebody who's too good playing in the G League than to blow a top 20 pick on a guy who might not be a player. I think the best way to really grow an NBA contender is just to hit on picks year over year over year. The way you do that is by drafting good young players.
So let me ask you about the tiers, because we talked at the beginning of the pod about the top of the draft and the way I think the Rockets have it, which is 5 guys after Wemby in fairly close proximity. So you could stay right in the middle of it where you are at 4 if you're comfortable with how the board is falling. You could also try to move up or perhaps move down a bit and get some assets with that. One of the things that is at play with pick 20, assuming that they don't package that with 4 or some other asset, or maybe, if they're worried about not having enough roster spots, I suppose you could always try to kick the can down the road and trade for a future pick. We see a couple of teams do that every year. Assuming that they make a second first-round pick, one option that's been floated is moving up, because there's definitely some access on the roster as it stands. You've got your first-round guys from a couple of years ago, Usman Garuba, Josh Christopher. You can also look at the forward spots where Jabari Smith Jr. and Tari Eason are a big part of your future, but you also have Jayshawn Tate and KJ Martin. In our podcast last night with Michael Scotto, we talked about some Jayshawn hypotheticals in terms of moving him, because there's a bit of overlap at those positions, and there's a very clear incentive to perhaps clear some additional cap room and move into, the upper 60s to nearly $70 million in cap space if you have Tate off the roster. And he's the kind of guy, as Michael Scotto pointed out, that's very plug and play. A lot of contenders should have interest in him. So there might be some possibilities to move up from 20 to, I don't know, somewhere in the mid-teens. I suppose if you take on some higher salary, there's been some interesting proposals floated about Dallas as high as 10, because that's a very win-now franchise. How big of a teardrop is there between, I would say, the 10 to 15 range and where the Rockets are at 20, and how significant would you look into trade up scenarios given where the Rockets are and given how your board is currently constructed?
It really depends on who's there. I mean, there's a world where Nick Smith or Bryce Sensabaugh falls all the way to 20, and in that world, why would you trade up, right? Like, I have those two guys tiers ahead of the guys who you would trade up to get. And I think it also matters, like, who is your guy, right? Like, even if, like, I have Leonard Miller or Grady Dick is a good example. I have Grady Dick a tier below Smith, Sensabaugh, Wallace, and Ant Black. But if you really buy the fit and you really buy him being able to come in day one and help, yeah, I'd trade up from 20 to, if he falls to 15 or like 14, if he falls to that range, I'd give up assets to move up for Dick if you think the fit is that good, right? Like, even if, I'd rather just sit and wait for Sensabaugh, you can't do everything in a vacuum, right? Like, yes, in a vacuum, I prefer Nick Smith and Sensabaugh, but in real life, on the ground, Grady Dick is a better fit, will contribute early, and is going to be a really good long player for a long time. And if you really buy that and you want to trade up to get that guy, then do it. Don't just wait around and wait for whoever falls. Like, we can be a little relaxed. Go out, get your guy, be aggressive.
Yeah. So we've been going long. I mean, we always go long, so I should stop saying we're going long, because it's just normal for us. But I usually end with a more of a lighthearted question, right? Just get some laughs going out of the podcast. And my question this time is, how do I tell Rockets fan 1, 2, 3 that just because Daisha Nix averaged 25 and 7, shooting 40% from 3, that doesn't mean that Scoot Henderson having the stats that he had last season means nothing, because Knicks averaged God knows what in the G League? How do I show Rockets fan 1, 2, 3 on Twitter that, that's bullshit?
I like that question because it's really tough as a Rockets fan to not be radicalized by the Dacian Nix, Trevelyan Queen G League experience. But I think that the team context and the goal of the teams they were on was very different, right? Scoot's team, Scoot has to get minutes and get usage. The vets have to get minutes and get usage. Leonard Miller, City Sissoko, all these different guys have to get minutes in play and get reps, right? Scoot is not the only guy out there. Scoot also played with Jaden Hardy and Marshawn Beauchamp and Dyson Daniels and all these different guys last year and was still one of the best players in the G League, right? G League stats and its style of play are basically useless unless you're super contextualizing them. And there's almost no way to super contextualize points, rebounds, and assists per game, right? The RGV Vipers played super fast, and part of that is because that's the only way that Nix is feasible as a player, because he can't play in the half court, because he's too slow, he's not fast enough as a processor, and he can't shoot. So he can't play in the half court. But they got out in transition, and he's really good at making the right read and keeping his head up and making the pass ahead. But you don't get nearly as many transition attempts in the NBA. And so when he comes here and he can't play in the half court, it's like, what? The G League is meaningless. It's like, well, no, the super high pace and style of play in the G League makes it not a perfect transition. There's no one-to-one this guy succeeded in this league, so he will succeed in the NBA. There's really high, Luka really succeeded in the Euro League, so there's a really high chance he'll succeed in the NBA. But nothing is certain, right? So don't let one bad apple spoil how good the G League is, compared to relative comp. Don't let Dacian Nix's fat butt spoil.
You hear that, Dacian Nix, fat butt, and
wow.
You hear that, Rockets fan 1, 2, 3.
I met Dacian Nix once. Okay, I'm allowed to say these things to him. So
I hope Dacian Nix's family members are not listening. If they are, God,
bro, they're in my mentions crossed all the time.
Yeah,
they can come find me. They can come talk to me. I'll help them.
Y'all said it, not me. All right. Well, we'll finally bring this to a close. By the way, to defend ourselves against the Paolo allegations, we actually did have a 37-minute pod, which is probably a record low for us when we had Mike Scotto from Hoops Hype on the other night. But to peel back the curtain, there's a reason for that. I have an unlimited Microsoft Teams subscription, which is how we typically record. Scotto, for whatever reason, has had some trouble with Teams in the past, so he asked if we could do Zoom, which we were willing to. But the thing is, if you don't have a subscription, Zoom caps you at 40 minutes. So, that's
to peel the curtain back even further. Not only were we on a limited Zoom call, we are also recording 3 podcasts in the same week, so we don't get the excuse. So we're recording what was near 2 hours. This one is an hour and a half. Yeah. So we're recording 4 hours of pod. This is basically a 4-hour podcast, so we don't get to pull that card.
Yeah, it's going to average more than an hour for sure. So even if one was short, we don't get credit for a short podcast. And it's basically part 2 of what amounts to a busy 3-part week. Anyway, that's what you can expect from us this offseason. We know how pivotal this is for the Rockets as a franchise, 2 more first-round picks, and then a very pivotal free agency period with at least $60 million in salary cap room. It could be even more than that if they move Jae'Sean Tate or Kevin Porter Jr. So many possibilities. Throw in the room exception, which is bigger than anybody's used to, at about $8 million a year as well. It's going to be busy, so as news breaks, we'll definitely react to it here on the Logger Line. Cooper, thank you so much for taking the time. I know on Twitter, people can follow you at Ali_oop_Coop. Is there anything you're working on as far as upside swings or the chop shop that people should be looking out for over this final week until the draft?
Yeah, mainly upside swings. We are basically releasing a pod every single day for the next 7 days. We've released pods the last 3-4 days at this point. We have a Rockets-specific episode if you want to listen to us talk with James Piercy about the Rockets draft in very deep detail and the hard and off season and more from a draft perspective, right? My 2 co-hosts are not Rockets fans, but they're draft guys as well. We talked about that. And if you want basically in-depth breakdowns, for free on our top 70-ish players. I think it'll be by sometime in the next few days. You can check out our website. We have a lot of stuff over there at upsideswings.com. That has been my brainchild. It's been my labor of love over the past month and a half or so. And we have a workout tracker. We have
excellent
written articles. We have our podcasts. We have big boards, scouting reports on all these guys. So that anything you need for the draft, you can check out our website and listen to HTX Chop Shop if you want any Rocket stuff. I haven't done as much stuff over there recently, but once the draft's over, I'll be over there doing a lot of Rocket stuff with my guys.
Yep.
And, thanks again for having me on, y'all. This was really, really fun.
Absolutely. I enjoyed this, and I'm looking at upsideswings.com now. Yeah, y'all have fantastic resources between the big board, the scouting reports, lots of good content. Again, just check out upsideswings.com and you can get the full big board from Cooper along with the other guys doing their work over at Upside Swings, and of course listen to their pods as well. With that, we'll finally bring this part 3 of a 3-part week, if you will, to a close. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this, and we'll try to be back next week with, can't promise 3 episodes, but we'll definitely be back with more, since it's going to be a very busy week, whether the Rockets stay in the draft, whether they trade out. There's going to be a lot to discuss, for better or for worse, and we'll have you covered right here at the Logger Line. If you want more content before then, the best place to get it, of course, is on Twitter. I'm on there at Ben Dubose. Paolo's on there at Paolo Alves NBA. Cooper's on there at Ali_oop_coop. And this show, The Logger Line, is on there at The Logger Line. And if you go to the link tree that's in our Twitter bio, that's where you can access certainly our distributors, Apple, Google, Spotify. Subscribe to this show, leave us a positive rating if you haven't already, but also content from our friends, partners, and sponsors. Carbach Brewing, Sports Talk 790, Rockets Wire. You can access all of their content simply by going to the link tree at the Logger Line. Show them some love, and we would definitely appreciate you for doing that, because we want to thank them for regularly supporting this program. With the plugs complete, we'll break. For Cooper and Paolo, I'm Ben. Thanks as always for listening, and please come back soon for another new episode of The Logger Line. Happy draft week, fellas.